The first sound I remember was not a voice, but a silence. Not the calm silence of deep space, but a chamber-deep stillness that pressed inward like gravity. It rolled across the Galactic Council Hall the way a shockwave rolls across a battlefield, unseen, irresistible, and absolute. For 3 centuries, I had stood beneath the crystal dome of the Council, watching stars bloom and die in the holographic sky above us. I had witnessed the fall of empires, the birth of alliances, the quiet erasure of species deemed too weak for the galactic order. Nothing had ever made the Council go quiet. Not war, not plague, not extinction. Yet this planet did. It hung in the air above us as a blood-red sphere, rotating slowly, contemptuously, as if aware of our fear. Black hurricanes spiraled across its surface, vast enough to swallow continents. White-hot lightning crawled like living arteries through the clouds. The oceans glowed sickly green, boiling beneath skies that bled radiation. The archives had named it simply, Class-15. Uninhabitable, untamable. A world that devoured life rather than hosting it. I had studied such planets as a young officer. We were taught to fear them, not with superstition, but with mathematics. Their gravity would crush bone into powder. Their atmosphere would dissolve lungs. Their radiation would strip flesh at the molecular level. No known intelligent species could survive there for more than minutes. From my vantage point on the upper balcony, my tendrils trembled despite my training. The hologram shimmered, a rotating monument to violence. Every sensor reading scrolled beside it like a litany of doom, pressure levels beyond survivable thresholds, temperature swings capable of melting alloys, storms that could tear apart starships. And yet, beneath that terror, there was something mesmerizing about it, a terrible beauty, a living storm given planetary scale. Then the readings changed. It began as a flicker, so small that the analysts nearly dismissed it as sensor noise. A pattern of heat, too regular to be random. A line of light cutting through the darkness. Then another, and another. Cities. The word rippled through the chamber like a tremor. The counselors leaned forward in unison, their robes whispering across marble floors. I felt my own heart stutter. Cities could not exist there. The planet itself should have torn them apart before they ever rose. The scanners zoomed closer. Towers glowed beneath the storm. Roads shimmered like veins of fire across continents. Vast urban webs pulsed with energy, organized, structured, undeniably artificial. The silence deepened into something colder. Then came the signals. Communication bursts, encoded transmissions, networks too complex to be natural phenomena. Movement patterns, vehicles, aerial craft, orbital infrastructure. Life, intelligent life, thriving life. But the data was merciless. It did not care for our disbelief.
In my 300 years of service, I had cataloged dozens of species. I had watched entire civilizations rise from their cradle worlds into the stars. I had also watched many fail, burned away by their own suns or crushed beneath hostile planets. This world should have ended any species before it began. Instead, it had birthed one. The council convened an emergency session. I was summoned by name, a rarity that made my chest tighten. My role would be that of observer, neutral, analytical, and above all, truthful. I was to accompany the recon fleet into that hellish atmosphere and return with answers. We launched at dawn cycle. The fleet assembled in orbit like a ring of steel against the planet's wrath. From space, the storms looked almost serene, a crimson marble wrapped in spirals of darkness. Up close, they were anything but. The descent began. Our shields screamed. That is the only way I can describe it. Instruments designed to withstand stellar flares wailed in protest as we pierced the upper atmosphere. The air itself seemed alive, clawing at our hull. Lightning struck the fleet in endless chains, leaping from ship to ship like a predator hunting in packs. 2 cruisers vanished before my eyes, simply gone, swallowed by turbulence so violent that even our long-range sensors could not track their demise. Inside my observation chamber, gravity fluctuated wildly. My limbs grew heavy, then light, then crushing again. Warning glyphs flooded every surface. Hull plates vibrated with a keening hum that resonated through my bones. I remember thinking, absurdly, that this was what death sounded like. Through the viewport, the world below emerged from the clouds, not as a dead wasteland, but as something heartbreakingly alive. Jagged mountains tore skyward like broken teeth. Seas roiled in endless fury. Stormfronts stretched from horizon to horizon, darker than night. Yet amid that chaos, ribbons of light threaded the surface. Roads, settlements, massive metropolitan spires that stabbed defiantly into the storm. Some were wrapped in shimmering energy fields, others simply endured, battered but unbroken. Our landing site trembled beneath us as the ship touched down. The ground cracked in spiderweb fractures around our landing struts. Toxic vapors rose in ghostly green clouds. Radiation meters spiked beyond any safe threshold. I braced myself for panic from the locals, for chaos, for primal terror at the sight of starships descending from the heavens. Instead, they came. Tiny figures moved through the rain like shadows. At first, I thought they must be heavily shielded, encased in advanced exosuits that rivaled our own technology. But as they drew closer, my translators corrected that assumption. They wore little more than thin layers of protective material, helmets, simple respirators, nothing that should have allowed them to stand beneath that sky, let alone walk toward us.
Vehicles roared behind them, groundcraft that tore across flooded streets at impossible speeds, engines screaming over the storm. Drones hummed overhead, weaving through lightning as if daring it to strike. A delegation stopped at a respectful distance. Their leader stepped forward. 2 eyes, forward-facing, predator-like, my instincts whispered. Yet her posture was calm, controlled, unafraid. She spoke through a translation device, her voice steady despite the thunder ripping the air apart above her. "We see you," she said. Not pleading, not worship, a simple demand for acknowledgement. The recon commander responded cautiously, explaining our origin, our counsel, our concern over their world's classification. The word Class-15 echoed through the storm like a curse. The human laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, more like disbelief, as if we had just told her that the sky was optional. "This is home," she replied. Behind her, lightning split the clouds, illuminating her silhouette in blinding white. For a heartbeat, she looked almost mythic, fragile flesh standing firm against a planet that should have destroyed her. Our scanners swept over their city, power grids woven into tectonic fault lines, energy harvested directly from storms, atmospheric processors that turned poison into breath, habitation domes glimmering like jewels against the darkness. The more we saw, the more impossible it became. They had not merely survived this world, they had reshaped it, forced it into a brutal partnership. Night fell quickly. On this planet, darkness was not gentle. It swallowed everything in deep violet shadows, pierced only by lightning and the glow of human lights. From my viewport, I watched their city pulse with life beneath the tempest. Children, actual children, moved through protected walkways above the streets. Ships lifted and landed in dizzying patterns. Towers thrummed with power drawn straight from the storm. A cold realization settled into my mind like ice. We had come here as judges, as inspectors of a species we assumed must be primitive, desperate, or broken. But as I observed them standing calmly beneath a sky that would kill entire civilizations, I felt that balance shift. The Council had feared the planet. That fear was logical, measured, and backed by centuries of science. But I no longer feared the world. I feared its inhabitants. And as a new hurricane formed on the horizon, larger than any we had ever recorded, the human leader turned toward it, not away, and smiled. The storm greeted us before the planet did, not as weather, but as a living wall. From orbit it had looked chaotic yet distant, a patterned swirl of crimson and black. Inside it, however, the atmosphere felt less like air and more like a hostile ocean that wanted us dead. The moment our fleet crossed the atmospheric boundary, reality itself seemed to flex against us. I felt it through the deck plates of the command cruiser, a trembling vibration that resonated up my limbs, into my spine, and straight into my thoughts. My suit hissed softly, compensating for pressure fluctuations that rose and fell in violent pulses. Instruments designed to survive stellar radiation spasmed and flickered. Every console glowed with warning glyphs. There was no dawn here, no gentle transition from night to day. The sky burned in perpetual twilight, lit by lightning that stitched itself across the clouds in violent, jagged lattices. Each bolt was so massive it cast shadows on the underside of our ships. "Maintain formation," the recon admiral ordered, his voice strained even through translation filters. Formation. The word felt absurd. Nothing maintained order inside this storm. Turbulence slammed into us like a hammer. The cruiser lurched violently, throwing my body against the restraints. Across the fleet, I saw 2 escort vessels shudder, then vanish in a blinding flash of white. Their transponders died instantly. No distress signal, no wreckage, only silence where they had been. 2 cruisers lost before we had even reached stable flight. My hearts pounded. I had descended into hostile atmospheres before, methane giants, acidic superworlds, irradiated wastelands, but none had felt like this. This was not merely dangerous. This was predatory. The planet was not passively killing us. It felt as if it were actively hunting us. Through the viewport, the clouds began to thin, not because the storm eased, but because we had punched deeper into its heart. And there, beneath the chaos, the world revealed itself. Jagged mountain ranges pierced upward like broken bones. Their peaks glowed faintly with geothermal heat, venting plumes of toxic gas that shimmered green and violet in the lightning. Oceans churned violently, boiling along fault lines that glowed like cracks in reality itself. Massive cyclones spun across the seas, each larger than entire star systems I had mapped in my youth. And yet, threaded through all of it, were lines of light. At first, I thought they were sensor artifacts, but the closer we descended, the clearer they became. Roads, networks, highways that cut through mountains and skirted the edges of erupting volcanoes, bridges spanning chasms that dropped kilometers into darkness. Cities emerged next. Not primitive settlements, not scattered habitats clinging desperately to survival. Entire megacities sprawled across the continents, gleaming towers rising defiantly against the storm. Some were wrapped in shimmering energy barriers, their surfaces rippling like liquid glass. Others stood naked to the elements, their structures scarred but unbroken. How? The question echoed in my mind with terrifying intensity. How could anything be built here? How could a civilization endure these conditions long enough to evolve, let alone industrialize? Our scanners mapped their infrastructure in real time. Power grids ran directly into tectonic rifts, siphoning energy from the planet's own violence. Atmospheric processors dotted the skyline like alien flowers, converting poison into breathable air. Massive turbines stood atop mountain ridges, harvesting wind that would have torn apart most ships. It was madness, engineered madness. The recon admiral selected a landing zone near one of their largest urban centers. From above, the city glowed like a beacon in hell, rings of light layering atop one another, stretching outward in geometric precision despite the raging storm. As we descended, the turbulence intensified. Our shields flared to full capacity, bleeding energy in dazzling arcs across the hull. The cruiser screamed, not metaphorically, but literally, the metal vibrating at frequencies that rattled every bone in my body. Then the ground appeared beneath us. The landing was anything but smooth. The planet itself bucked as our thrusters fired. Shockwaves rippled outward across cracked terrain. Fissures opened beneath our landing struts, molten rock bubbling upward before rapidly cooling into jagged glass. Atmospheric toxins flooded our external sensors, distorting readings into incoherent noise. Radiation levels spiked so high that automated systems shut down non-essential equipment to prevent overload. And still, despite all of this, I saw movement below. Humans gathered. Not fleeing, not screaming, not cowering beneath their structures. They came forward, walking through sheets of acid rain as though it were nothing more than a nuisance. Their silhouettes moved steadily toward our vessel, tiny figures framed against towering storm clouds. Their vehicles arrived first, roaring machines that tore across flooded streets at impossible speeds, tires carving through debris as if the ground itself dared not resist them. Drones streaked overhead, weaving through lightning strikes with impossible precision. I expected hostility, weapon systems, panic. Instead, their movements were measured, calculated, curious. Our hatch opened with a hiss that was instantly swallowed by the storm. The recon admiral and his delegation descended the ramp, shields activated, weapons holstered but ready. I followed, my suit compensating for pressure that would have crushed lesser species. The air burned my suit's outer plating. Chemical alerts blared in my ear. Minimally sufficient. For them. They formed a loose semicircle at a respectful distance. No kneeling, no bowing, no trembling fear. Just observation. One human stepped forward, the same leader I had seen before, but now I could study her properly. Her face was calm, almost unreadable, but her eyes tracked every movement of our delegation with surgical precision. Behind her, lightning ripped the sky apart, illuminating her figure in stark white for a split second. In that flash, she looked less like a fragile biological being, and more like a sentinel carved from stone. She spoke first.
Not with reverence, but with authority. "We see you," her translator projected. The words carried through the storm with eerie clarity. As the Admiral responded, I turned my attention back to their city. Closer now, the scale was overwhelming. Towers soared kilometers into the sky, their upper sections disappearing into black clouds. Platforms hovered above the streets, connected by magnetic transit lines that pulsed with light. And there, impossibly, were children. Actual juveniles. Small humans moving through protected skywalks, laughing, playing, living beneath a sky that could kill entire civilizations in seconds. My mind reeled. This was not a desperate colony clinging to survival. This was a thriving, confident world. The twist came when our sensors recalibrated. At first, we believed the planet's storms were random, chaotic expressions of natural violence. But as we analyzed the energy flows around the city, a chilling pattern emerged. The storms bent. Not drastically, but subtly. Lightning arcs curved away from critical infrastructure. Wind currents diverted around towering spires. Even the torrential rain seemed to thin slightly above populated districts. The humans were not merely enduring the planet. They were influencing it. Not controlling, not fully, but shaping its wrath just enough to live within it. Their technology did not oppose the storm. It danced with it. A low hum filled the air as massive generators beneath the city began drawing power directly from the lightning above. Bolts crashed into towering collectors, their energy funneled downward in brilliant cascades of blue-white light. The recon admiral stiffened beside me. I felt his fear through our shared neural link. We had come expecting primitive resilience. Instead, we had found a species that had turned apocalypse into infrastructure. As night fell, though night here was simply deeper darkness, the city ignited. Lights flared across every structure, shimmering like a second sky beneath the first. Ships lifted from landing pads with thunderous roars, ascending into the storm without hesitation. And then, on the horizon, something fast began to form. A superstorm, larger than any we had recorded, its central vortex glowing with eerie crimson light. The clouds spiraled inward in a perfect, terrifying symmetry that defied all natural models. The human leader turned toward it. Not away, not with fear, but with something that made my blood run cold. Anticipation. As the first impossible lightning bolt arced from the super sober directly to our fleet, the ground trembled beneath us, and I realized the truth with devastating clarity. We had descended into a world that did not merely kill empires. It forged them. They did not kneel. That was the first thing that unsettled me. Across 3 centuries of galactic history, I had witnessed first contact with dozens of emerging species. Some fell prostrate at the sight of starships. Others raised weapons in desperate defiance. Most trembled beneath the weight of our arrival, as though the sky itself had descended to judge them. The humans did none of this. The storm battered the landing zone with unrelenting fury, acid rain hissing against our hull, thunder rolling across the city like artillery fire. Yet the delegation walked toward us with slow, deliberate steps. Their protective garments were thin, flexible, almost insultingly simple, barely sufficient. And yet they crossed that lethal expanse as if it were merely an unpleasant drizzle. I watched them through the observation glass, my inner membranes tightening with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Their figures were small compared to us, fragile by galactic biological standards, but there was nothing fragile in the way they moved. Each stride was purposeful, balanced, unafraid. The recon admiral descended the ramp first,
flanked by 2 armored envoys whose shields shimmered like liquid starlight. I followed behind, my translator embedded along my cranial ridge, glowing softly. The human delegation stopped at a respectful distance, not submissive, not aggressive, simply measured. Their leader stepped forward. She was female, according to our biological scan, though that word felt inadequate to describe her presence. Her posture was straight despite the hurricane-force winds whipping around her. Her face was calm, weathered by years beneath a merciless sky. But it was her eyes that unsettled me most. They were like polished steel, reflective, sharp, and utterly unreadable. She lifted a small device toward her mouth, the translation matrix in my implant activated with a faint hum. "You have entered restricted planetary airspace," her voice said, rendered perfectly into our galactic standard. No fear, no reverence, only controlled authority. A murmur rippled through our delegation. No species had ever spoken to the Council's fleet in such a tone upon first contact. The Admiral straightened, clearly unsettled but disciplined. "We are representatives of the Galactic Council," he replied carefully. The human tilted her head slightly, rain draining through the transparent visor of her helmet. Lightning flared behind her, briefly etching her silhouette into stark relief. "Council," she repeated. Her voice carried neither anger nor hostility, only weary curiosity, as if she had asked similar questions countless times before. The Admiral hesitated. For once, the practiced diplomacy of the Council faltered. "Your planet is classified as Class-15. Silence. Then laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, but incredulous. A soft, almost breathless sound that felt profoundly human. Several others in her delegation shared it, shaking their heads beneath their helmets. "Class-15, she asked, gesturing broadly toward the raging storm, the cracked ground, the boiling seas visible in the distance. My translator struggled for a moment, clearly confused by the nuance of her words. Before the Admiral could respond, she continued, her tone sharpening slightly. "Who are you, really?" There it was, the real question. The Admiral inhaled, visibly steadying himself. He explained the Council's fear of Class-15 worlds, the historical precedent of catastrophic planets birthing violent species, and the perceived risk of a civilization that could survive here. As he spoke, I studied the humans closely. Their expressions shifted, not to fear, but to something dangerously close to irritation. When he finished, their leader turned slowly, gesturing toward the city behind her. "Come," she said simply. Against all protocol, she invited us closer. Our shields remained active as we stepped onto the trembling ground. The earth vibrated beneath our feet, a constant reminder that we stood on a world that actively tried to kill everything upon it. Yet the humans moved with casual familiarity. They led us through streets carved from hardened composite materials that shimmered faintly with embedded energy lines. Massive storm collectors loomed overhead like metallic trees, their spires crackling with captured lightning. Each strike funneled energy downward in brilliant arcs that illuminated the entire district. As we walked, towering transit platforms glided silently above us, carrying streams of human citizens through protected skyways. Some stared down at us in open curiosity. Others barely glanced our way, too absorbed in their daily routines. Daily routines, beneath a sky that devoured empires. The human leader paused before a massive generator complex built directly into a tectonic rift. Molten rock glowed deep below, pulsing with raw geothermal energy. Vast turbines spun overhead, their rotations synchronized with the rhythm of the planet itself. "This is how we power our cities," she explained. "We don't fight our world." Our scanners struggled to process what we saw. Energy flows were not chaotic here. They were engineered with surgical precision. The planet's violence had been mapped, harnessed, and woven into the very fabric of human civilization. We were then escorted to a massive habitation dome. Its translucent surface shimmered like liquid glass, filtering the toxic atmosphere into breathable air within. Inside, parks flourished with green life, plants adapted to thrive in harsh conditions, watered by carefully controlled systems that mimicked natural rainfall. Children ran freely beneath artificial skies that glowed softly, yet still echoed faintly with distant thunder. My heart ached with a strange, unfamiliar emotion, something dangerously close to admiration. The Admiral spoke quietly through our link. "They have not merely survived." The human leader, whose name we later learned was Commander Reyes, turned to face us once more. "Tell your council something," she said, her voice steady, but edged with iron. We did not conquer this planet by subjugating it. We survived it by respecting its fury and adapting to it. Her words struck harder than any weapon. Night began to fall, though here, darkness felt less like absence of light and more like an additional layer of hostility. The city ignited around us in waves of luminous brilliance. Skyscrapers glowed, transit lines shimmered, and storm collectors flared as lightning crashed into them in calculated precision. Above, the clouds churned with renewed intensity. A distant superstorm loomed on the horizon, its core pulsing like a colossal beating heart. And yet, within the dome, life continued uninterrupted. Music echoed faintly, conversations hummed through the air. The ordinary persisted in the face of the extraordinary. It was then that the true twist settled into my mind. We had come as evaluators, as judges of a species we believed might be primitive, reckless, or dangerously unstable. The entire mission had been framed around our authority, our standards, our classifications. But as I looked into Commander Reyes's eyes, I realized the terrifying truth. They were evaluating us. Every question they asked was precise, every glance measured. They observed our shields, our weapons, our hesitation beneath their storm. They noted how our suits strained, how our sensors faltered, how our confidence wavered in their environment. To them, we were the fragile ones. At one point, Reyes leaned closer, her voice low enough that only my translator could pick it up clearly. "You fear our planet," she said, "and because of that, you fear us." A crack of thunder split the sky directly above us. The dome flickered for a heartbeat before stabilizing. Outside, lightning carved jagged scars across the clouds. The Admiral bristled, but said nothing. As we prepared to depart the dome, Reyes gestured toward the horizon. The storm there had grown impossibly vast, its spiral arms stretching across half the visible sky. Even our most advanced models could not predict its behavior. "Watch," she said simply. High above the city, massive orbital structures began to glow. Beams of controlled energy lanced downward, interacting with the storm in subtle, calculated ways. The outer bands of the hurricane bent, diverted, reshaped around the metropolitan center. Not stopped, not defeated, but guided, like a river steered by a skilled hand. I felt a cold weight settled into my chest. This was not luck, not brute force, not desperation. This was mastery born of relentless struggle. As we ascended back toward our ship, the storm roared overhead, lightning painting the world in blinding flashes. The city beneath us shimmered defiantly against the darkness. And in that moment, I understood something that no council archive had prepared me for. We had not arrived on a doomed world. We had stepped into the cradle of a species forged by apocalypse, tempered by chaos, and utterly unafraid of the universe that birthed them. As our engines ignited and the cruiser lifted into the screaming sky, Commander Reyes stood motionless below, watching us depart with calm, unwavering eyes. And for the first time since we entered this planet, I wondered, not whether humans were dangerous, but whether the Galactic Council was ready for them at all. Outside the viewport, the superstorm's core flared crimson, and it began to move. They called them trials of verification. We should have called them what they truly were, a test of dominance disguised as scientific caution. From the orbital command spire above the planet, the Council watched through a lattice of projection screens that wrapped the chamber like a living halo. Every storm, every fissure, every boiling ocean glimmered in real time. Even from orbit, I could feel the arrogance in the Council's calculations. They believed the universe operated in clean thresholds, pressure that crushes, heat that melts, radiation that kills. If humans crossed those lines, they would be broken. If they failed, the Council would be justified. If they succeeded, no one had prepared for that possibility. I stood beside the Recon Admiral as the first trial commenced. A containment field shimmered into existence across the plateau, a transparent dome of layered energy strong enough to withstand orbital bombardment. Inside, atmospheric conditions were altered with surgical precision. pressure spiked to levels that would pulverize most biological life. Our own envoys retreated behind reinforced observation barriers. Even our drones trembled at the energy fluctuations. Then the humans walked in. They did not crawl, they did not stagger, they did not hesitate. A small team, 6 of them, crossed the boundary as though stepping through a doorway. Their suits were rugged but simple, far less advanced than our own. Readouts screamed in my peripheral vision, pressure beyond survivable limits, temperatures climbing into ranges that warped metal, radiation saturating the air like an invisible poison. One of our elite soldiers, a council-certified survivor of 3 atmospheric hellscapes, collapsed within seconds of entering a secondary observation ring at far safer parameters. His body convulsed as his suit failed to compensate fast enough. Medics dragged him out gasping. Inside the dome, the humans merely adjusted their breathing. They planted drills into the ground, analyzed samples, and communicated with calm efficiency. One knelt directly atop a vent of superheated gas that would have vaporized our armor. His suit shimmered, scorched, but held. The council murmured in disbelief. I felt my tendrils tighten with a mix of dread and fascination. The second trial began without pause. Temperature escalation. The dome filled with a shimmering haze as heat climbed beyond industrial forge limits. Metal began to bend along the containment frame. Even our sensors faltered.
2 of our reconnaissance drones drifted too close and simply died, circuitry liquefying in seconds. Inside, one human removed a malfunctioning coolant regulator from a mobile reactor they had brought with them. The casing ruptured violently, releasing a plume of white-hot plasma that forced us all to recoil behind our shields. I expected death. Instead, the human stepped closer. With nothing but handheld welding equipment and what appeared to be sheer, stubborn will, he sealed the fracture. Sparks sprayed across his visor. His suit glowed orange. Every diagnostic screamed that he should already be dead. Yet he worked methodically, steady hands, controlled breathing, until the reactor stabilized. The chamber fell silent. Not stunned silence, not fearful silence, horrified silence. The third trial pushed radiation to catastrophic levels. Particles tore through the dome like invisible blades. Warning glyphs filled every projection screen in the council hall. Even shielded observers reported nausea and disorientation. We deployed biological monitors to track the human cellular degradation. The results came back wrong. Their cells were not collapsing. They were adapting. Metabolic rates shifted. Protective proteins spiked. Their bodies behaved not like fragile life, but like organisms conditioned by centuries of exposure to annihilation. One human, a woman with scarred hands, stood at the center of the radiation storm, calmly calibrating an emitter that should not have functioned under such conditions. Her suit was riddled with microfractures, yet she did not falter. When the trial ended, she removed her helmet. Her skin was flushed, her breath heavy, but she smiled. That smile unsettled the council more than any weapon could have. The fourth trial was not environmental, it was psychological. The council simulated planetary collapse scenarios, cascading tectonic ruptures, atmospheric collapse, magnetic field failure. Holographic projections turned the plateau into a dying world in real time, oceans boiling away, skies shredding, continents tearing apart. Our soldiers recoiled, some fled, others froze. The humans split into teams without hesitation. They treated the simulation not as terror but as a problem to be solved. They argued strategies, built temporary structures, redirected energy flows, and coordinated evacuations that did not exist. They did not panic, they planned. It was then that whispers began to ripple through the council chambers across the galaxy. I heard them through my diplomatic link, fragmented, trembling, but clear enough. They are not merely survivors. They hunt chaos. They thrive where the universe breaks. By the fifth trial, the council abandoned subtlety. They tested limits no species had ever crossed. Gravitational distortions that warped space itself, energy fluxes capable of tearing starships apart, atmospheric densities that turned air into crushing liquid. We watched as the containment field shimmered under strain. The plateau beneath it cracked and groaned like a living creature in pain. Inside, the humans struggled for the first time. One fell to his knees, another braced against a mobile support rig that began to buckle. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their suits flickered, systems failing one by one. For a moment, the council exhaled collectively, relief disguised as scientific satisfaction. Then something shifted. The fallen human forced himself upright. His teammates moved in perfect synchronization, redistributing weight, reinforcing equipment, compensating for each other's failures. Where one faltered, another steadied. Where technology broke, they improvised with raw materials torn from the plateau itself. They lashed supports together with crude cables. They welded cracked frames with handheld tools that should not have functioned under such conditions. They built, in minutes, a structure that our engineers would have said was impossible even in ideal circumstances. And they endured. When the field finally collapsed and the trial ended, the humans stood battered but unbroken amid the smoking wreckage. Their suits were scorched, their faces were bruised, their bodies trembled. But they were alive. The council erupted into chaos. Some demanded immediate military containment. Others argued for alliance. A few, like me, sat frozen in stunned contemplation. I realized with a sinking, terrifying clarity, these trials had not proven human weakness. They had exposed our own. We had designed environments that had wiped out entire civilizations, worlds that shattered empires, collapsed ecosystems, erased histories. Yet humans had walked through them, adapted, improvised, and emerged stronger. One human approached the edge of the dome as it dissipated. Commander Rhea stood waiting beyond the boundary, her eyes steady as ever. The battered team crossed toward her. She did not cheer. She did not gloat. She simply placed a hand on the shoulder of the most wounded among them. "We adapt," she said quietly. Then she turned her gaze upward, directly toward the orbital spire where the council watched. Her voice carried clearly through every channel. "You tested our world against us," she said. A chill rippled through the chamber. I felt my awe deepen, not into fear, but into something far more dangerous. Admiration. Because in that moment, I understood the truth that the council was still too proud to see. Humans were not merely children of a death world. They were predators shaped by it, creatures that did not simply survive catastrophe, but learned to master it. As the plateau smoldered beneath retreating storms, orbital sensors began to register something new. A fluctuation, a disturbance far beyond the planet itself.
Its energy signature bled upward into space, twisting magnetic fields around our fleet. Alarms blared across the command spire. Below, Reyes did not look surprised. She simply watched the sky, waiting as the first crimson arc of impossible lightning leapt from the storm, directly toward us. The guns came first in silence. From the surface, they looked like distant stars suddenly growing too bright, cold, metallic points of light, arranged in a perfect, menacing constellation above the storm-racked sky. From orbit, I knew what they truly were: the barrels of the Council's warfleet, each cannon capable of sterilizing continents with a single coordinated volley. I stood in the observation gallery of the orbital command spire, my reflection ghosted against the glass as the planet churned beneath us. Clouds boiled in endless, furious motion. Lightning stitched the atmosphere together in blinding veins. And above it all floated the fleet of judgment, a ring of dread that had cowed entire civilizations into surrender before a single shot was fired. Fear had turned into doctrine. Doctrine had turned into aggression. In the emergency council session, voices had risen like clashing blades. Some argued for patience. Many did not. The dominant chorus was simple and brutal. If humans can master a Class-15 Deathworld, they will master the stars. And if they master the stars, they will rule them. I remembered the way humans had stood beneath that impossible sky, unbowed, unafraid, alive in ways that made our own survival seem delicate. That memory twisted in my chest as the warships maneuvered into position. Each vessel rotated slowly, targeting arrays locking onto pre-selected coordinates, power grids, storm collectors, transit hubs, military installations we believed must exist. From our perspective, it was strategy. From the planet's, it would be annihilation. The recon admiral joined me at the viewport, his posture rigid. Through our shared neural link, I felt his unease. Sharp, electric, impossible to hide. "Authorization is imminent," he said aloud for the sake of protocol. Below, the human cities glowed defiantly against the gathering darkness. Ships still moved through their skies. Children still walked their elevated pathways. Life continued as if the heavens were not about to rain fire upon them. And then, instead of mobilizing armies, they did something that stunned even the most hardened war strategists in the fleet. They spoke. A broadcast erupted across every channel in the system, not just to our fleet, to the entire council network, to every relay station, to every listening post across hundreds of light years. The signal was clear, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Commander Reyes appeared in a unified holographic projection that shimmered in every chamber, bridge, and command deck simultaneously. Behind her, the storm raged, lightning carving the sky into jagged fractures of white. Yet she stood perfectly steady, as if the planet itself refused to disturb her. "We see your ships," she said, her voice calm but edged with iron. A murmur rippled through the council assembly in distant chambers. I felt it through my diplomatic implants: fear, anger, uncertainty, and something dangerously close to doubt. "We did not call you here," Reyes continued. "We did not seek your approval." The camera shifted briefly, revealing ordinary humans behind her: workers repairing storm collectors, pilots guiding vessels through lightning, families sheltering beneath shimmering domes. Not soldiers, not war, just people, living, enduring, unbroken. "Our planet has tried to kill us since the first breath we ever took," she said. "Every storm, every quake, every fire has tested us. We adapted, we endured, we built." Her gaze hardened, locking onto the orbital fleet as though she could see us through the clouds. "You point your weapons at our home and call it caution." Across the system, their message shifted. Not just words now, images, histories, voices, archives of their wars against nature, of cities rebuilt after catastrophe, of communities standing together after devastation, songs of resilience, speeches of unity, scenes of ordinary humans refusing to yield to a universe that wanted them dead. It was not propaganda, it was lived truth. And that truth struck harder than any weapon. On our own bridges, I saw officers waver. Gunners hesitated over firing controls. Even seasoned admirals looked away from their tactical screens. Some council-aligned species watching remotely began to transmit messages of solidarity with the humans, quiet at first, then louder, braver. The fleet of judgment began to feel less like divine authority and more like an executioner being questioned by its witnesses. Then the planet responded, not through human machines, but through itself. The storms intensified with terrifying precision. Lightning no longer danced randomly across the clouds. It began to pulse in rhythmic waves that rippled upward into the upper atmosphere. Instruments across the fleet screamed as electromagnetic surges washed over our ships like invisible tidal waves. Power grids flickered, targeting systems stuttered, cannon capacitors overloaded and shut down in cascading failures. Even our most hardened warships shuddered under the planet's fury. It felt deliberate, coordinated, as though the world itself had chosen a side. On the surface, massive storm collectors flared to life in unison. Beams of controlled energy lanced skyward, interacting with the storm in ways our scientists could not fully decipher. The clouds bent, twisted, and coiled around the fleet like a living net. The recon admiral gripped the railing beside me, his claws scraping against alloy. "The planet is reacting," he whispered. Reacting was too mild a word. The planet was defending. A cruiser on the fleet's outer edge went dark as an electromagnetic pulse fried its core systems. Another ship's cannons locked in place, unable to move. A third lost propulsion entirely, drifting helplessly through the churning upper atmosphere. In the council chambers across the galaxy, the call for immediate bombardment began to fracture. Some still screamed for fire, others demanded retreat. A few, like me, could only watch in stunned silence. Below, Reyes did not gloat. She did not threaten. She simply stood, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed upward. "Leave our sky," she said softly, yet her words carried across every channel. The fleet hesitated. That hesitation was unprecedented. In all recorded history, the Council's war machine had never faltered when its guns were raised. Fear of annihilation had always been enough to force compliance from any world. Yet here we were, paralyzed not by another empire, but by a single species on a single brutal planet. The twist came not from the humans, but from within our own ranks. A Council-aligned envoy from a neighboring star cluster broke protocol and transmitted directly to the fleet. More voices followed, allies, former vassals, even long-subjugated civilizations who had once bowed to the Council's might. Their transmissions flooded our channels, not calling for war, but restraint. The balance of power shifted before my eyes. And then, as if sensing our wavering resolve, the storm above the planet did something impossible. The massive superstorm that had loomed on the horizon surged upward, not outward, but upward. Its core stretched into space like a colossal crimson pillar of energy, twisting magnetic fields around our fleet into chaotic spirals. Alarms blared across every bridge, shields flared, navigation systems failed. In the command spire, the High Counselors froze, faces pale beneath their ceremonial masks. Below, Reyes finally moved. She stepped forward, raising her hand toward the sky, not in defiance, but in calm acknowledgement, as if greeting an old and dangerous ally. The storm responded. Its outer bands wrapped around the fleet in a tightening spiral, not to destroy us, not yet, but to remind us of how easily it could. I felt something shatter inside me, the comforting illusion that the Council's power was absolute. For the first time in history, our might was checked, not by another armada, not by a rival empire, but by a single species standing upon a world that should have killed them long ago. The Recon Admiral turned to me, his voice low. I stared down at the glowing cities beneath the storm. The fleet's cannons remained raised, but silent. Silence stretched across the system like a taut wire ready to snap. Then, in the depths of the superstorm's core, something new ignited, a pulse so bright it turned night into day across half the planet. Sensors across our fleet registered an energy spike beyond anything ever recorded.
Reyes looked upward, eyes reflecting that crimson glow. And in that moment, I knew with terrifying certainty, the next move would not belong to the Council. It would belong to the storm, or to the humans who had learned to live within it. The shot was not meant to be fired. That was the tragedy the fleet would repeat for years afterward, in hearings, in archives, in the quiet confessions of sleepless admirals. It was an error, a glitch, a cascade failure. None of it mattered when the sky tore open. From the orbital spire, the planet had looked like a wounded giant wrapped in storms. Beneath that endless churn of clouds lay a human outpost, a modest settlement by their standards, a sprawl of domes, power collectors, and transit platforms built along a volcanic ridge that glowed faintly even through the tempest. I had been watching that settlement through long-range optics, fascinated by how ordinary life persisted beneath a sky that should have annihilated it. Children moved through shielded corridors, cargo haulers threaded between storm towers, maintenance crews balanced along elevated catwalks, dwarfed by lightning-scorched spires. Then, the fleet shuddered. On the edge of our formation, a cruiser's weapons array spasmed under the strain of the electromagnetic storm. Safeties failed, capacitors overloaded. A single cannon vented energy, not a coordinated strike, not a planned volley, just a jagged lance of incandescent death that ripped downward through the atmosphere. I saw it before anyone could speak. A white-blue spear that pierced cloud, tore air, and slammed into the heart of the outpost. The impact was blinding. From orbit, the settlement blossomed into fire. Habitation domes ruptured like fragile bubbles. Storm collectors collapsed in cascading shards of metal and glass. A shockwave rolled outward, flattening structures that had stood firm against hurricanes for decades. Alarms erupted across every bridge in the fleet. The council chambers went silent, not in solemnity, but in horror. On the surface, night became day. Flames clawed toward the sky in monstrous pillars, their glow painting the clouds blood red. Toxic smoke billowed upward, torn apart by the storm and scattered across kilometers of land. I felt my heart's hammer against my ribs. We had feared human retaliation, bombardment, missiles, orbital weapons. Our battle simulations had all ended the same way, a brief, brutal exchange that reduced the planet to silence. Instead, there was nothing. No counterstrike, no anti-orbital fire, no missile trails arcing upward. Only chaos and screams, faint but present in intercepted emergency channels. Below, the settlement burned. Thousands of lives hung in balance, clinging to collapsing structures, trapped beneath debris, choking on poisoned air. Our sensors registered a catastrophic humanitarian crisis unfolding in real time. The Recon Admiral ordered a stand down. Every cannon powered down. Every ship froze in place. From orbit, the settlement blossomed into fire. Habitation domes ruptured like fragile bubbles. Storm collectors collapsed in cascading shards of metal and glass. A shockwave rolled outward, flattening structures that had stood firm against hurricanes for decades. Alarms erupted across every bridge in the fleet. The council chambers went silent, not in solemnity, but in horror. On the surface, night became day. Flames clawed toward the sky in monstrous pillars, their glow painting the clouds blood red. Toxic smoke billowed upward, torn apart by the storm and scattered across kilometers of land. I felt my heart's hammer against my ribs. We had feared human retaliation, bombardment, missiles, orbital weapons. Our battle simulations had all ended the same way, a brief, brutal exchange that reduced the planet to silence. Instead, there was nothing. No counterstrike, no anti-orbital fire, no missile trails arcing upward. Only chaos and screams, faint present in intercepted emergency channels. Below, the settlement burned. Thousands of lives hung in balance, clinging to collapsing structures, trapped beneath debris, choking on poisoned air. Our sensors registered a catastrophic humanitarian crisis unfolding in real time. The recon admiral ordered a stand down. Every cannon powered down. Every ship froze in place.
And then, astonishingly, the humans moved, not as soldiers, not as avengers, as rescuers. From every direction, emergency vehicles surged toward the flames. Groundcraft tore across shattered roads, tires shredding against molten debris. Aerial transports plunged through lightning to hover above collapsing domes. Drones swarmed like metallic flocks, scanning for life beneath the rubble. I watched in disbelief as crews worked under conditions that would have killed most species outright. Acid rain hissed against their suits, firestorms roared around them, radiation from ruptured reactors spiked wildly. They did not hesitate. Teams cut through burning wreckage with plasma saws, medics dragged unconscious civilians from smoke-choked corridors, pilots threaded shuttles between falling towers with impossible precision. Everywhere I looked, humans ran toward danger, not away from it. And then came the twist that shattered the fleet's last illusion of moral superiority. On the outskirts of the settlement, 2 of our cruisers, caught in the same electromagnetic surge that caused the misfire, had lost control during descent. Both had crashed into marshlands not far from the outpost, their hulls ruptured, crews scattered and wounded. Standard doctrine would have written them off as losses. We did not expect rescue, certainly not from the species we had just attacked. Yet human response units diverted immediately. I tracked one shuttle as it angled away from the burning city toward the wreckage of a downed cruiser. Its pilot flew directly through a lightning storm that forced our own ships to retreat. The craft touched down beside the smoking hull, engines still whining. Humans spilled out. They did not raise weapons. They did not demand surrender. They moved straight into the wreck. Through our feeds, I saw them pull injured aliens from twisted metal, our kind, broken and bleeding, barely conscious. A human medic knelt beside a commander whose exosuit had been torn open, calmly stabilizing his wounds with equipment far simpler than our own. Another team dragged an unconscious pilot across burning debris, shielding his body with their own as a collapsing beam crashed nearby. They saved their own first, as any species would. But then, they saved us. I felt something crack inside me that no storm had ever broken. From orbit, the fleet watched in stunned silence. No one spoke. No orders were given. The gun barrels that had once pointed downward like instruments of divine judgment now looked obscene against the backdrop of burning human lives and alien rescue. Hours passed in a blur of fire, smoke, and thunder. The storm above the planet raged harder than ever, yet it seemed almost respectful. Lightning arced away from rescue zones, winds bent around emergency corridors. Whether by coincidence or design, the world gave its children, and their enemies, space to breathe. At dawn, if such a thing could be called dawn here, the flames began to ebb. Smoldering ruins stretched across what had once been a thriving outpost. But amid the devastation, pockets of life remained. Triage tents lowing softly, shuttles ferrying survivors, and human rescuers moving tirelessly through ash and rain. The recon admiral stood beside me in the spire, his voice barely above a whisper. I could only nod. The humans did something far more dangerous than retaliation. They chose mercy. Commander Reyes appeared once more on system-wide channels. Behind her lay the shattered remains of the outpost, smoke curling into the stormy sky, rescue lights flickering like constellations on the ground. Her face was streaked with ash, her armor scorched, yet her gaze was steadier than ever. "Accidents happen," she said, her voice carrying no bitterness, only exhaustion. The image shifted briefly to show our wounded pilots being loaded onto medical transports beside injured humans, treated with the same urgency, the same care. Then Reyes looked upward, directly at the fleet. "You came prepared to kill us," she continued. Silence rippled across every council channel. On the bridge of a nearby dreadnought, a gunner collapsed to his knees. In the council chamber light years away, a high counselor removed his ceremonial mask with trembling hands. Across the fleet, captains ordered their weapons powered down, not out of fear, but out of shame. The resolve that had carried the fleet of judgment into orbit shattered beneath the weight of its own guilt. I felt it too, a crushing mixture of sorrow, humiliation, and something painfully unfamiliar: reverence. Below, the humans continued their work long after the broadcasts ended. They buried their dead, they treated their wounded, and they cared for ours. As night fell once more, the planet's storms calmed just enough for the smoke to rise in tall, solemn columns. The burning city became a silhouette against a bruised sky. And then, on the horizon, the great superstorm we had watched since our arrival began to shift again, its crimson core pulsing with renewed intensity. Orbital sensors screamed warnings, magnetic fields twisted, space itself trembled. Reyes paused in her work, looking toward that distant, roiling abyss in the clouds. Her rescuer slowed, following her gaze. On the spire, the recon admiral stiffened. "It's changing," he said. I stared down at the planet, at the ruins, at the survivors, at the humans who had saved us after we had tried to destroy them. The storm did not look Randran anymore. It looked deliberate, patient, watching. And as a towering column of crimson energy began to rise from its heart, arcing toward the stars, I understood the cliffhanger that hung over us all. The night of fire had ended, but the reckoning of the sky was only beginning. We positioned our remaining fleet at the edge of the planet's greatest storm, a continental-scale vortex so vast it was visible even from deep orbit. From space, it resembled a wound. In reality, a spinning abyss of black clouds, crimson lightning, and impossible currents that bent both atmosphere and magnetosphere into a single roaring maelstrom. Sensors failed, ships drifted. Many of my own officers refused to approach it, convinced the storm was not merely weather, but a living force. Yet the humans flew straight toward it. Their leader, Commander Reyes, emerged on a solitary platform suspended above the vortex, anchored by cables and anti-gravity stabilizers that shimmered against the lightning. Around her, the sky twisted like a coiled serpent. Bolts of energy spiraled upward, as though crowning her with incandescent light. Beneath her boots, the abyss raged, swallowing mountains of rain and debris into its endless throat. The Council's supreme commander appeared before her as a towering hologram, armored in gold and cold authority. Between them stretched the storm, a battlefield made of sky itself. Reyes did not raise her voice, she did not posture, she simply spoke, her words cutting through the thunder with eerie calm. She reminded the Council that humans had endured extinction-level storms, tectonic catastrophes, poisoned atmospheres, and starless nights, and survived not by obedience, but by defiance. They would not expand aggressively, she said, but they would never yield their sovereignty, their world, or their right to exist. Behind her, rescue shuttles still rose from the planet, carrying both human and alien survivors side by side, living proof of her words. I watched the Supreme Commander falter, his usual certainty cracked beneath the weight of a species that did not fear oblivion because it had already lived within it. In that trembling silence above the abyss, I understood at last. Humans were not terrifying because of their weapons. They were terrifying because their will was forged in storms far older than the Council itself. The withdrawal did not feel like victory. It felt like gravity releasing its grip. From my command deck, I watched the warfleet turn its massive prows away from the planet that had nearly broken us. Engines flared, ion trails carving luminous scars across the darkness. Yet there was no triumph in the movement, only exhaustion, humility, and a tremor of something dangerously new. Fear had carried us here. Awe carried us home. The cruisers did not depart in tight formations of dominance. They drifted apart like wounded beasts limping from a battlefield they could not win. Behind us, the Class-15 Deathworld burned in perpetual stormlight, cyclones coiling across its surface, auroras screaming along its magnetic field, and continents shuddering under tectonic fury. We left humans standing beneath that chaos. When we returned to the Galactic Council chamber, the air itself felt heavier. The vast circular hall, once a cathedral of certainty, now seemed smaller, more fragile.
Above us hovered the holographic projection of the human world, but it no longer glowed crimson with warning. Its storms pulsed in gold and violet, refracted through filters that made it resemble a living heart. I stood among trembling delegates from 1,000 species who had spent millennia believing the universe belonged to them by right of power. Now they sat in silence beneath a planet that had humbled them without firing a single weapon. The Supreme Commander spoke first, not in commands, but in confession. He admitted that the Council had mistaken survivability for superiority and comfort for strength. The chamber rippled with murmurs, anger, shame, wonder, and a faint spark of curiosity. Then came the proposal no one expected. Humans were not to be conquered, contained, or quarantined. They were to be invited. The words echoed like thunder through the hall. Invitation to the Galactic Compact. Full recognition, full sovereignty, no conditions. I felt my secondary heart stutter. A diplomatic envoy was assembled, not an armada, but a delegation of scholars, engineers, healers, and artists. I was chosen again, this time not as an observer of danger, but as a witness to possibility. We returned to the planet in vessels stripped of weapons and layered with translation arrays instead of cannons. As we descended, the storms were no kinder, the atmosphere no gentler. Yet this time, we did not descend in fear. We descended in respect. Below us, human cities glittered like constellations trapped on the ground. Their spires pierced toxic clouds. Their transit lines gleamed like veins of light across continents. Massive storm harvesters rose like metallic titans, drinking lightning from the sky and converting apocalypse into energy. They met us not with soldiers, but with children. I will never forget that image. Tiny humans, wrapped in bright insulated suits, stood beside towering infrastructure that could have humbled entire empires. They waved toward our ships, not in submission, but in welcome. Commander Reyes greeted us again, her presence calmer now, but no less commanding. She spoke of partnership, not allegiance, of shared knowledge, not shared rule, of coexistence in a universe that would devour the complacent. Humans brought gifts to the Council. They offered storm-driven reactors that could power entire star systems without planetary collapse. They presented atmospheric restoration engines capable of reviving dead worlds. They revealed medical technologies forged from surviving lethal radiation, treatments that could save species we had long considered doomed. Yet their greatest gift was not technological. It was philosophical. They spoke of resilience as a communal responsibility, of survival as a collective act, of unity not through dominance, but through mutual protection against a hostile cosmos. They had learned these truths not in ivory towers, but beneath skies that tried to kill them daily. Many council members wept.
I found myself staring again at the hologram of their planet from orbit. The storms still raged, the seas still boiled, the tectonic plates still screamed. Nothing about the world had softened. And yet, something had changed. Hope shimmered across the stars. From orbit, I watched their cities sparkle like scattered diamonds beneath endless lightning. I saw aerial rescue fleets dart through hurricane-force winds. I saw vast planetary shields flare briefly as meteor fragments disintegrated in the upper atmosphere. I saw humans laugh, truly laugh, while standing on a world that would have driven my species to extinction. They did not survive despite their planet. They survived because of it. In council chambers, Treaties were signed that no one would have believed possible mere cycles ago. Humans took their seat among the stars not as vassals, not as threats, but as equals, forged in fire, baptized in storm, tempered by suffering. I was tasked with writing the official galactic record of first contact, but no words felt adequate. How do you explain a species that turns catastrophe into curriculum? How do you describe beings who mine hurricanes, tame earthquakes, and build hope atop apocalypse? As I prepared my final report, I noticed something unsettling. Human probes were already leaving their system, not as warships, but as exploration vessels brimming with scientists, storytellers, and engineers eager to learn rather than conquer. Their ships were fast, too fast, faster than our most advanced cruisers. They crossed the void with the same reckless confidence with which they crossed their storms, engines blazing, hulls shimmering, trajectories daring and unpredictable. The Council celebrated this as proof of peaceful intent.